I'll be honest. I still remember the way my husband looked at my sister across our dinner table, because it was the first time I realized he had stopped looking at me that way. My sister took my husband, and the cruelest part was that she barely tried to hide it. She did not sneak into his life quietly or disappear into some secret place where I could pretend I never had a chance to see it coming. She walked through my front door with a smile, sat beside me at family dinners, laughed at his jokes in my kitchen, and slowly became more important in my marriage than I was. And I let it happen right in front of me, because trusting your own sister feels safer than questioning your entire life. My name is Natalie, and I was 37 when everything finally broke. Mark and I had been married for 5 years, living in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, in the kind of house that looked ordinary from the street and felt steady from the inside. We had routines, shared bills, Sunday grocery runs, favorite takeout places, and the comfortable silence of two people who knew how to exist in the same room without needing to perform love every second. At least, that was what I thought it was. Stability can be dangerous when you mistake it for honesty. My younger sister's name is Anna, and for most of my life, I protected her before anyone even asked me to. She was the emotional one, the impulsive one, the one who cried easily and made people forgive her faster than they should have. When relatives called her selfish, I said they misunderstood her. When friends said she needed attention too badly, I said she was just insecure. When she hurt people, I explained it away because I was her older sister, and older sisters learn early how to turn someone else's chaos into something softer. I loved her. That was the problem. Anna started coming over more often about a year before I found the truth. At first, it felt normal because family has a way of entering your life without needing permission every time. She would stop by after work, stay for dinner, help me fold laundry, or sit at the kitchen island while I cooked and complained about my day. Mark never seemed bothered by it, and honestly, I was grateful for that. Some husbands make your family feel like a burden. Mark made Anna feel welcome. Back then, I thought that meant I had married a kind man. The first few months were harmless on the surface. Anna laughed easily. Mark teased her like a brother-in-law would, and I watched them get along with a small feeling of relief. There was no awkwardness, no tension, no forced politeness at holidays or birthdays. My husband liked my sister liked my husband, and I told myself that was a blessing. Then the visits changed. They became longer, more casual, less announced. Anna would come over just for coffee and still be sitting on the couch 3 hours later. She started staying for dinner without asking. Then she stayed overnight once because the weather was bad, then again because she said she was too tired to drive, and somehow my guest room started feeling less like a spare room and more like a place reserved for her. I did not question it. She was family. That sentence protected her for far too long. The first moment that stayed with me happened on a Thursday evening after dinner. We were sitting around the table, half-finished glasses of wine in front of us, and Anna was telling some story from work that probably was not as funny as Mark made it seem. He laughed, leaned back in his chair, and looked at her with a softness that made something inside me go very still. It was not a look a man gives his wife's little sister. It was quick, almost nothing. But I saw it. Anna saw it too, because she looked down at her glass and smiled like she had been handed something private. I told myself I was overthinking. That is what betrayal counts on. A few days later, I was working in the small office off the hallway while Anna and Mark were in the living room. I could hear their voices through the wall, low and steady, not loud enough for words, but close enough for tone. It did not sound like casual conversation. It sounded careful, intimate, like they were speaking in a way meant only for each other. When I stepped into the doorway, they stopped immediately. Not gradually. Immediately. Anna looked up first and smiled too brightly. "You're done working?" Mark reached for the remote even though the television was already on. "We were just talking." "About what?" I asked. He shrugged. "Nothing. Nothing." I have learned that when two people say nothing too quickly, it usually means everything. Still, I let it go, because the alternative felt impossible. This was my husband and my sister. Not a stranger from his office. Not some woman from a bar. Anna knew my childhood, my heartbreaks, my wedding vows, and every private fear I had ever trusted her with. She had stood beside me in a pale blue dress while I married Mark, crying so hard during the ceremony that people joked she was more emotional than I was. So no, I was not ready to believe she could want the man she watched me marry. But after that night, I started noticing. I noticed how Mark's posture changed when Anna entered a room. I noticed how she laughed before he finished speaking, as if she already knew where his thoughts were going. I noticed how conversations shifted when I came near, and how often I walked into a room feeling like the last line had been cut off just before I arrived. Then, one night, I woke up and found Mark's side of the bed empty. The house was dark except for a thin line of light under the living room door, and as I walked closer, I heard Anna whisper something I could not make out. Then Mark answered softly. "Not yet," he said. "She still doesn't see it." For a moment, I stood in the hallway outside the living room, holding my breath like one small sound from me might make the truth disappear before I could understand it. Mark had said the word softly, but not softly enough. Not yet. She still doesn't see it. There was no innocent version of that sentence. Not at midnight. Not with my sister sitting beside him on the couch. Not with the two of them close enough that their shoulders almost touched while I was supposed to be asleep in the bedroom we shared. I wanted to walk in right then. I wanted to turn on every light in the house and force them to look at me while they explained why my husband was whispering about what I did or did not see. But something colder than anger stopped me before I moved. It was the kind of instinct that arrives when your body understands danger before your heart is ready to accept betrayal. If I confronted them with only that sentence, they would deny it. Mark would tell me I misunderstood. Anna would cry. And somehow, because she was my sister and he was my husband, I would be expected to feel guilty for making things ugly. So I stepped backward. Slowly. Carefully. I went back to bed and lay on my side, staring at the wall while my whole body stayed awake. A few minutes later, I heard the living room grow quiet. Then there were soft footsteps in the hallway, the guest room door closing, and finally Mark slipping into bed beside me like he had not just cracked my world open from the other side of a wall. He touched my shoulder lightly. "You awake?" he whispered. I kept my breathing even. I did not answer. The next morning, everything looked painfully normal. That was the worst part. Mark made coffee. Anna sat at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone, and sunlight poured through the windows like the house had not held a secret a few hours earlier. Anna asked if we had plans that weekend. Mark complained about a meeting at work. I buttered toast with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. I watched them without letting my face change. Anna laughed at something Mark said, and he smiled into his mug before looking at me. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I looked at him for half a second longer than I normally would have. "Not really," I said. His expression stayed calm, but Anna's thumb stopped moving across her phone screen. Just for a second. That was when I knew they were listening to more than my words. They were measuring me. So I started measuring them back. Over the next few days, I did not confront anyone. I did not ask why Mark had been out of bed, and I did not ask Anna why she had been sitting with him in my living room after midnight. I simply became quiet inside myself, careful in a way I had never needed to be in my own home. And once I stopped explaining everything away, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Anna came over more often than before, but now her visits felt less like family and more like access. She did not ask if it was a good time anymore. She just appeared with coffee, groceries, or some little excuse that made her presence seem thoughtful. Mark never looked surprised when she arrived. Sometimes he looked almost relieved. That hurt in a place I did not know how to name. I noticed how he changed when she was there. With me, he was polite, present, predictable. With her, he became lighter. His face opened in a way I had not seen in months. He leaned into her stories. He remembered details she had mentioned weeks earlier. He laughed before she finished speaking, like they were already meeting somewhere I could not reach. Anna changed too. She began moving through my house like she had a claim to it. She knew where Mark kept the good whiskey, which mug he preferred on Sunday mornings, and how to fix the television input when it froze. None of those things should have mattered on their own, but together they made me feel like I had become a visitor in my own marriage. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected after my dentist canceled an appointment. Anna's car was in the driveway, which should not have surprised me by then, but it did. I sat there for a moment, staring at it, and felt that same cold awareness move through me. I opened the front door quietly. The house was still. Then I heard voices upstairs. Low voices. Not from the hallway. From my bedroom. My bedroom. I moved slowly up the stairs, one hand on the railing, listening as my heartbeat grew loud enough to drown out their words. By the time I reached the landing, the voices had stopped. Then came movement. A drawer closing. A rushed whisper. And a few seconds later, Anna stepped out of my bedroom. She froze when she saw me. Then she smiled. "You're home early," she said. Same sentence. Same tone. Same little panic hidden under something casual. I looked past her into the room. "What were you doing in there?" She held up a cardigan I had not worn in months. "I was just borrowing this," she said. "You said I could, remember?" I had said that once. Long ago. Before I understood that some people hear permission as ownership. I nodded slowly and walked past her into the bedroom. Nothing looked wrong at first. The bed was made. The closet door was open. Mark's watch sat on the dresser where he always left it. Then I saw my jewelry box. The lid was slightly crooked. Not open. Just moved. I turned back toward Anna. She was still standing in the doorway, watching me watch the room. And in that moment, I felt the truth shift again. This was not only about attraction anymore. This was not only about secret conversations and looks held too long. Anna was not just taking my husband emotionally. She was practicing being me. I stood in my bedroom after Anna walked away, looking at the crooked lid of my jewelry box, and something about that tiny detail frightened me more than if I had found a drawer fully open. A mess would have looked careless. This looked practiced. It looked like someone had touched my things gently, moved them just enough to study them, and then tried to put everything back before I noticed. I opened the box slowly, not because I expected anything dramatic, but because my body had started trusting small evidence more than big explanations. At first, nothing seemed missing. My wedding earrings were still there. My mother's old gold bracelet was still wrapped in tissue. The necklace Mark had bought me on our second anniversary sat in the corner, tangled with a chain I rarely wore. Everything looked almost right, and somehow that word, almost, had become the center of my life. Then I saw the empty space where my pearl earrings should have been. They were not expensive, not really, but they mattered because I had worn them on my wedding day. Anna knew that. She had stood behind me in the bridal suite, fastening the clasp of my necklace while I cried because my hands were shaking too badly to do it myself. She had told me I looked beautiful. She had wiped mascara from under my eye. She had held those earrings in her palm and said, "These are perfect." Now they were gone. I did not run after her. I did not accuse her. I simply closed the jewelry box and stood there in the quiet because I understood something I wished I could unlearn. Anna was not only getting closer to Mark. She was getting closer to the version of me that belonged beside him. That evening, she stayed for dinner again. Of course she did. She sat at our table wearing a cream sweater I had never seen before, her hair curled softly around her face, acting like nothing in the world had shifted. Mark grilled chicken, opened wine, and moved through the kitchen with an energy he almost never had for ordinary weeknights anymore. I watched him place a glass in front of Anna before mine, then immediately correct himself by reaching for another. It was small. It was also not small at all. Anna touched the stem of her glass and smiled without looking at me. I looked at her ears. My pearl earrings were there. For a second, the room went silent inside my head. She was wearing my wedding earrings at my dinner table, across from my husband, in the house where I still lived. The cruelty of it was so quiet that I almost could not believe it was happening. "Those are pretty," I said, keeping my voice even. Anna's hand went to her ear too quickly. "Oh," she said, and her smile flickered. "I borrowed them from your box." "I hope that's okay." Mark looked down at his plate. Not surprised. Not confused. Just quiet. That told me he already knew. I wanted to ask him why my sister was wearing jewelry from our wedding while sitting in front of him like she had been invited into a role I had not stepped out of. I wanted to ask Anna whether there was any part of my life she did not feel entitled to touch. But anger would have given them room to make me look dramatic, and I was starting to understand how carefully they depended on my reactions. So I smiled. Not warmly, just enough. They mean a lot to me, I said. Anna swallowed. I'll give them back. Mark finally looked at me. Nat, she probably didn't think it was a big deal. That sentence landed harder than the earrings. Because he defended her before I even accused her. I looked at him across the table, and for the first time, I saw the order of his loyalty change in real time. He had not asked why Anna took something from my bedroom. He had not asked why she was wearing my wedding earrings. His first instinct was to soften what she had done before I had even named it. I didn't say it was a big deal, I replied. But inside, something was breaking very cleanly. Over the next few days, Anna became bolder in ways that would have sounded ridiculous if I tried to explain them to anyone. She started using my phrases when she talked to Mark. She cooked the pasta dish I always made when he had a hard week. She sat in my usual chair in the living room and curled her feet under herself like she had studied the shape of my comfort. Once, I walked into the kitchen and found her wearing my apron, the blue one with flour stains near the pocket. Mark was standing beside her, laughing at something she said while she stirred sauce on the stove. For 1 second, I did not see my sister and my husband. I saw a rehearsal, a replacement dinner, a life being tested while I was still inside it. That night, after Anna went to the guest room and Mark claimed he was tired, I sat alone in the living room and stared at the hallway where both of them had disappeared to separate rooms. Separate doors. Separate lies. My phone was in my hand, but I had no one to call, because how do you say this out loud without sounding insane? My sister is wearing my earrings. My husband is defending her. They stopped talking when I entered the room. She is not just flirting with him. She is becoming me. The next morning, I found the earrings on my dresser. No note. No apology. Just placed neatly beside the jewelry box, as if returning them erased the fact that she had worn them. I picked them up and held them in my palm for a long time, remembering my wedding day, remembering Anna crying behind me, remembering Mark's face when I walked down the aisle. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Are you okay? Anna said things have been tense at home, and she's worried about you. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Anna was already talking to my family, not apologizing, not confessing, preparing them. And then another message came through, this time from Anna by mistake, clearly meant for Mark. Mom is starting to believe me. Just don't act weird around Natalie tonight. I stared at Anna's message until the words stopped looking like words and started feeling like a door opening into another betrayal. Mom is starting to believe me. Just don't act weird around Natalie tonight. For a few seconds, I could not move, because the message was not only proof that Anna and Mark were hiding something. It was proof that they were already preparing for the moment I found out. They were not just crossing lines in my house, wearing pieces of my life and whispering in rooms where I had once felt safe. They were building a version of me that would make my reaction look unstable before I even had a chance to react. That hurt in a way I had not expected. Because cheating is one kind of betrayal, but turning your own mother against you before you tell the truth is something colder. It means they knew the truth would come eventually, and instead of stopping, apologizing, or backing away, they chose to make sure I would not be believed when it did. I sat on the edge of the bed with my wedding earrings in my palm and Anna's message glowing on my phone. Then I took a screenshot. That small action steadied me more than crying would have. It gave the pain somewhere to go. It turned the ache in my chest into something useful, something I could keep, send, show, and protect myself with when they inevitably tried to tell me I had imagined everything. A minute later, Anna sent another message. This one was meant for me. Sorry, wrong person. I meant to text Mom. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the lie was so weak it felt insulting. She knew I had seen it. I knew she knew. Still, she reached for the smallest possible cover because that was what Anna always did when consequences got too close. She did not tell the truth. She created a softer hallway and hoped someone would follow her down it. I typed back only one word. Okay. Then I locked my phone and sat very still. That evening, Anna came over again. I had not invited her, but by then she no longer acted like my home required permission. She arrived just after 6 with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile, wearing a soft beige sweater and the careful expression of someone who had spent the drive rehearsing innocence. Mark was already home. That was the first strange thing, because he had told me he would be late. When Anna walked in, his face shifted before he could stop it. Not relief exactly. More like recognition. The look you give someone when you have been waiting for them, even if you are pretending you have not. I watched it happen from the kitchen. Anna hugged me, and I let her. Her arms were warm around my shoulders, but all I could think about was my phone upstairs, holding proof that she had been feeding my mother a story before I even knew there was a story to defend myself from. "You seem quiet," she said, pulling back. "I'm tired." Mark looked at me too quickly. "Long day?" I nodded. Something like that. Dinner was unbearable in the calmest way possible. Nobody shouted. Nobody confessed. Nobody made a mistake big enough to end the performance. Mark asked about my work, Anna complained about traffic, and I watched them both act like people who had not been whispering about what I still did not see. But I noticed everything now. I noticed how Anna avoided my eyes whenever my mother's name came up. I noticed how Mark reached for his glass whenever the room got too quiet. I noticed how carefully they did not touch, because they knew touching would be too obvious, and that careful distance somehow felt more intimate than contact. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. It was my mother calling. Anna's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Mark looked down at his plate, and in that tiny shared reaction, I understood that my mother was no longer outside this situation. They had brought her into it. They had placed her somewhere between their lie and my truth, hoping she would soften the impact before I could speak. I answered at the table. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was gentle, but cautious in a way that made my stomach twist. "Sweetheart, is everything okay over there?" Anna looked at me. Mark did too. I held the phone against my ear and looked straight at my sister. "Why wouldn't it be?" My mother sighed softly. "Anna said you've been acting different. She said you seemed tense with her and Mark." There it was. Not a full accusation. Something worse. Concern. The kind of concern that makes you sound fragile before you have even explained why you are hurting. I swallowed slowly, because if I raised my voice now, Anna would win the first part of the story. "I'll call you back later," I said. "When I can speak privately." The silence on the other end changed. My mother heard that. So did Anna. After I ended the call, nobody moved. Then Mark said, very carefully, that sounded dramatic. I looked at him across the table. And for the first time all night, I let my face show exactly how much I knew. "No," I said. "What's dramatic is both of you thinking I wouldn't notice." The room went completely still after I said that, and for the first time all evening, neither of them looked comfortable inside the lie anymore. Anna's fork stayed suspended over her plate, and Mark sat across from me with his mouth slightly open, like he was trying to decide whether I knew enough to accuse him or just enough to be dismissed. That was the part that made me feel almost calm. I could see them calculating, and once you see someone calculating how much truth to give you, you stop waiting for honesty. Anna recovered first, because Anna had always been better at turning guilt into emotion. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but her voice came out too soft. I looked at my sister for a long moment, trying to find even one trace of the girl I had protected my whole life. I wanted to see shame. I wanted to see panic. I wanted to see something human enough to prove that she understood what she was doing to me. Instead, I saw fear of being exposed. "You texted me by mistake," I said. Her face changed immediately. Mark looked at her so fast that it almost made me laugh, because his first reaction was not confusion, not concern, not even anger at the possibility that my mother was involved. His first reaction was toward Anna, like she had broken the rule of their secret and not the heart of his wife. "What text?" he asked. I turned my phone around and placed it on the table between the three of us. Anna did not need to read it. She already knew. Mark leaned forward anyway, and as his eyes moved over the screen, the color drained from his face in a way that told me exactly how much the message had revealed. "Mom is starting to believe me. Just don't act weird around Natalie tonight." The sentence sat there between the wine glasses and dinner plates, ugly and perfect. I looked at Anna. Believe what? She swallowed, and her eyes filled with tears so quickly that I almost admired the timing. Natalie, I was worried about you. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. You were preparing her. Mark shifted in his chair. That's not fair. I turned to him slowly. Do not speak to me about fair. He looked away first. That small victory did not feel good. It only made me sadder. Because this was my husband, the man who had once held my hands during our vows, now sitting beside my sister at my dinner table while both of them tried to decide which version of me would be easiest to defeat. Anna wiped under one eye, though the tears had barely fallen. You've been tense lately. You've been looking at us like we did something wrong. I stared at her, and there it was. The shift. Not denial of what she had done. A quiet accusation about how I had reacted to it. You wore my wedding earrings, I said. Her lips parted. Mark's jaw tightened. You came into my bedroom, I continued. You took something from my jewelry box, wore it at my table, and then told our mother I was acting strange. Anna shook her head, but she could not make the denial reach her eyes. I borrowed them. You're making it sound worse than it was. I let out a slow breath, because that sentence showed me exactly how she had been telling the story. I was not hurt. I was dramatic. She was not crossing lines. She was misunderstood. Mark was not pulling away from his wife. I was imagining things because I had become difficult to live with. That was their plan. Not just to betray me. To make my pain look unreasonable. My phone buzzed again, still lying on the table. This time it was a message from my mother. Call me when you can. Anna is crying now. What is going on? I looked at Anna, and her expression betrayed her before she could hide it. You texted her again? I asked. She lowered her eyes. Mark pushed his chair back slightly. Natalie, maybe you should take a breath before this gets bigger. That was the moment something inside me finally turned cold. Not broken. Cold. Because he had not said, I'm sorry. He had not said, we need to tell the truth. He had not even asked what Anna had told my mother. He only wanted the situation to stay small enough for him to manage. I picked up my phone and stood. Anna looked up quickly. Where are you going? To call Mom, I said. Mark stood too. Don't do that right now. I looked at him across the table, at the man who used to make me feel safe, and I realized he was not trying to protect me from pain. He was trying to protect himself from witnesses. No, I said. You don't get to control who hears the truth. Then I walked into the hallway and called my mother back. She answered on the first ring. Natalie, she said, and her voice was already worried. I closed my eyes for 1 second, because I knew whatever I said next would tear open my family in a way nothing could easily repair. Then I said, Mom, I need you to listen carefully, because Anna and Mark have been lying to you about me. My mother was silent for so long that I almost thought the call had dropped. Behind me, in the dining room, I could hear Mark and Anna moving quietly, not speaking loudly enough for me to catch the words, but enough for me to understand they were scared. Not sorry. Not devastated. Scared. There is a difference, and by then I had learned to hear it. What do you mean they've been lying to me? My mother asked. Her voice was careful, and that hurt more than anger would have. Anna had already put something in her mind. Not enough to make her accuse me, but enough to make my own mother sound like she was stepping around broken glass. I closed my eyes and leaned against the hallway wall. Anna has been crossing lines with Mark, I said. And Mark has been letting her. I found messages between them. My mother did not answer right away. I could almost picture her sitting at the kitchen table in the house where Anna and I grew up, one hand pressed to her forehead, trying to make my sentence fit inside the family she thought she understood. What kind of messages? She asked. The kind that proved they knew exactly what they were doing. My voice stayed calm, but my hand was shaking around the phone. I hated that I had to say this to her. I hated that Anna had dragged our mother into something so ugly before I had even found the courage to name it. But I hated even more that if I stayed quiet, their version would become the first version, and first versions are hard to erase. Behind me, Mark called my name. Not loudly, just enough to remind me he was still there. I turned slightly and saw him standing at the end of the hallway with Anna behind him. She had been crying or pretending to cry, but when our eyes met, her face changed. She looked less like a broken sister and more like someone realizing the room was no longer under her control. "Don't do this over the phone," Mark said. I held my mother's call tighter against my ear. "That's Mark," I told her. "He doesn't want me talking to you." My mother's breathing changed. That was the first moment I felt her shift toward me. Mark's jaw tightened. "Natalie, you're twisting this." I laughed once, quietly, because the word twisting felt almost impossible coming from him. "I'm twisting it?" I asked. "Anna texted Mom before I even confronted you." Anna stepped forward then, wiping under one eye. "I was worried about you," she said. I looked at her for a long second. That sentence might have worked on me a year earlier. Maybe even a month earlier. I would have seen her tears, heard the tremble in her voice, and wondered if I had somehow been too harsh. But now I saw the timing. I saw the strategy. I saw how quickly she had turned my confusion into evidence against me. "You were worried I would find out," I said. Anna's mouth opened, but nothing came out. My mother spoke again through the phone. "Natalie, send me what you have." Those 6 words nearly broke me. Not because they fixed anything, but because they gave me ground to stand on. She was not asking me to calm down. She was not telling me I had misunderstood my sister. She was asking for proof, and for the first time that night, I remembered I had it. "I will," I said. I ended the call before Mark or Anna could say anything else, then opened the screenshots I had taken from Mark's phone. My fingers moved quickly now. The messages. Anna's accidental text. The one about my mother starting to believe her. I sent them all to my mother, one after another, while Mark watched the phone like it was a weapon. Anna's face went pale. "You took screenshots?" she whispered. I looked up at her. "Yes." Mark exhaled sharply and rubbed one hand over his mouth. That was the first time he looked truly afraid. Not because he had hurt me, because now there was a record. A minute later, my mother called back. I answered on speaker without thinking. Her voice was different now. Colder. Clearer. "Anna," she said, "what did you do?" Anna covered her mouth with both hands and started crying again, but this time nobody moved toward her. Not me. Not Mark. Not even the air in the room seemed willing to soften for her. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Anna said. My mother's voice sharpened. "That is not an answer." Mark stepped in quickly. "This is between Natalie and me." "No," my mother said. "You made it family when you let Anna come to me first." For one strange second, I saw both of them shrink. And maybe that should have felt good, but it did not. It only made everything feel more real. My marriage was ending in a hallway. My sister was crying beside the man she had taken from me, and my mother was hearing the truth through a speakerphone because Anna had tried to reach her first. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared at the top of the screen. It was from my aunt. "Natalie, why is Anna saying you're trying to ruin her life because Mark chose her?" My aunt's message stayed on the screen while my mother's voice was still coming through the speaker, and for a few seconds, I felt the whole room tilt in a direction I had not expected. "Natalie, why is Anna saying you're trying to ruin her life because Mark chose her?" Because Mark chose her. Those 3 words felt like a slap, not because I believed them, but because Anna had already turned the betrayal into a love story with herself at the center. She was not telling people she had crossed a line with her sister's husband. She was telling them she had been chosen, as if my marriage were some old sweater Mark had taken off and handed to her because it fit better. I read the message out loud. My mother went silent on the speaker. Mark looked away. Anna started crying harder, but this time her tears felt different. They were not panic anymore. They were strategy collapsing too late. "You told Aunt Linda that Mark chose you?" I asked. Anna shook her head quickly. "I didn't say it like that." I almost smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "Then how exactly did you say it?" She looked at Mark like she expected him to rescue her, but Mark did not move. That little silence between them told me something important. Whatever story they had built together, neither one of them wanted to be the first person responsible for saying it out loud in front of witnesses. My mother's voice came through the speaker, low and cold. "Anna, answer your sister." Anna wiped her face with both hands. "I told Aunt Linda that things were complicated." Complicated, I repeated. That word made betrayal sound so clean. Complicated was what people said when they wanted to hide simple cruelty under soft language. Complicated meant nobody had to say sister. Nobody had to say husband. Nobody had to say marriage. Nobody had to say that Anna had been sitting at my table, wearing my earrings, speaking to my mother, and preparing my family to doubt me before I even knew I needed defending. I turned to Mark. "And you?" I asked. "What were you telling people?" He looked exhausted, but not in a way that made me feel sorry for him. He looked like a man tired of being caught in the consequences of choices he had enjoyed making. "I haven't told anyone anything," he said. Anna looked at him quickly. Too quickly. I saw it. So did my mother, even through the silence that followed. "You're lying again," I said. Mark's jaw tightened. "Natalie, stop turning everyone against us." Us. There it was. Not against me. Not against Anna. Us. The word landed in the room with more force than any confession could have. He had finally placed himself beside her out loud, not as my husband, not as someone confused or sorry, but as part of the same side. My mother inhaled sharply through the phone. Anna closed her eyes. And I felt the last fragile thread of my marriage snap cleanly inside me. I picked up my phone from the table and took the call off speaker. "Mom," I said, "I'm leaving tonight." "No," she answered immediately. "You're coming here." I looked around the room, at the dinner plates still on the table, the wine Anna had brought, the earrings sitting upstairs on my dresser, and the husband who had just called himself us with my sister. "I need to pack a bag first." "Do not do it alone," my mother said. "I'm calling your brother." That almost broke me. Not because I needed someone to save me, but because someone had finally understood I was standing in a room where love had been turned against me. My family was no longer a safe assumption. My home was no longer a safe place. And the man who once promised to protect me was now worried about protecting a story. I ended the call and walked toward the bedroom. Mark followed. Of course he did. "Natalie," he said behind me, "you're making this worse than it has to be." I stopped in the hallway and turned around. "No," I said. "You made it worse when you let my sister tell our family I was the problem." Anna appeared behind him, smaller now, quieter, still crying, but no longer powerful inside it. "I was scared," she whispered. I looked at her carefully, and for one brief second, I saw every version of her I had ever protected. The little girl who cried when classmates excluded her. The teenager who borrowed my clothes without asking. The grown woman who always needed someone else to soften the damage she caused. But this time, the damage was my life. "You were not too scared to take him," I said. "You were only scared people would know how you did it." She covered her mouth and looked away. I went into the bedroom and opened the closet. The room looked the same, which felt almost cruel. Our bed was still made. Mark's shirts still hung beside my dresses. My jewelry box sat on the dresser, slightly too centered now, because I had placed it that way after finding the earrings returned. It was strange how quickly familiar things can become evidence. I pulled a suitcase from the top shelf and began packing. Not everything, just what mattered. Documents, clothes, medication, my laptop, the folder where I kept financial records. The earrings, because I could not leave them in that house even though I did not know if I would ever wear them again. Mark stood in the doorway. "I was going to tell you," he said. I did not stop folding clothes. "When?" He did not answer. That silence had become almost boring in its predictability. Anna's voice came from behind him. "He told me you already knew things were ending." I stopped moving. Then I turned slowly. Mark's face changed before he spoke, and that was how I knew she had just said something he did not want said in front of me. "He told you what?" I asked. Anna looked suddenly terrified, not of me, but of him. "He said you both had talked about separating. He said you were just waiting until after the holidays." The room went quiet. I stared at Mark, feeling the betrayal shift into something colder again. He had not only told me nothing. He had told Anna a version where I was already leaving, already aware, already part of a decision I had never made. That was how he made her feel less guilty. That was how he made himself feel less cruel. And maybe that was how Anna let herself take what was not hers. I looked at my sister. "And you believed him?" She did not answer. I nodded slowly. "Because it was easier." Mark stepped forward. That's not fair. I picked up the suitcase and zipped it shut. Fair ended the moment you made my marriage a secret conversation with my sister. At that exact moment, headlights swept across the bedroom window. My brother had arrived. Mark looked toward the window, then back at me, and the anger in his face finally broke through the calm. You called your family into our marriage? I looked at him with the suitcase in my hand. No, I said. Anna did. I looked at Mark when I said it, and for the first time that night, he did not have anything ready. No soft explanation. No careful tone. No sentence designed to make me feel unreasonable before I had even finished speaking. My brother's car door slammed outside, and the sound moved through the house like a line being drawn. Mark looked toward the window again, then back at me, and I could see him realizing that this was no longer a private room where he and Anna could shape the truth around me. There would be witnesses now. That changed everything. A minute later, my brother, Ryan, walked through the front door without knocking. My mother must have given him the key code, because he came in with the kind of controlled anger only family has when they know something terrible happened and they are trying not to make it worse. He looked at me first. Not Mark. Not Anna. Me. You ready? He asked. I nodded, and that simple question almost broke me because he did not ask me to explain myself. He did not ask whether I was sure. He saw the suitcase in my hand, saw my face, and understood that his job was not to judge the fire. His job was to get me out of the house. Anna started crying again when Ryan looked at her, but this time even he did not soften. He had grown up protecting her too, just in different ways. He had given her money when she made reckless choices, defended her when she created chaos, and rolled his eyes when I said she only needed more support. Now he looked at her like the family spell had finally broken. What did you do? He asked. Anna covered her mouth with one hand, but no answer came. Mark stepped forward slightly. This is between me and Natalie. Ryan turned toward him so slowly that Mark stopped moving. No, Ryan said. You made it bigger than that when you got involved with her sister. There it was. Said out loud. Simple. Ugly. Impossible to decorate. For a second, the whole room seemed to shrink around those words. Anna lowered her head, Mark looked away, and I felt something strange move through me. Not relief exactly. More like the exhaustion of finally hearing someone else name the thing I had been forced to carry alone. I walked past both of them with my suitcase. Mark said my name once. Anna said it too. I did not stop for either of them. At my mother's house, I finally cried. Not immediately. At first, I sat at her kitchen table with a glass of water I never drank while my mother moved around me in quiet little circles, making tea, finding blankets, calling my aunt back, and telling people just enough to stop Anna's version from spreading further. Then she came back to the table, sat across from me, and placed my phone between us. You do not have to defend yourself to everyone tonight, she said. That was when I broke. Because I had spent so many years defending Anna that I did not know how to stop defending myself from what she had done. The next few weeks were brutal, but clear. I filed for divorce. I sent the screenshots to my lawyer. I canceled Mark's access to shared accounts, changed every password I could think of, and slowly began separating a life that had taken 5 years to build. The house became a list of practical decisions instead of a home. Furniture, bank statements, insurance, documents, mail, the boring, painful mechanics of ending a marriage. Mark tried to talk to me several times. At first, he apologized. Then he blamed Anna. Then he said he had been confused, lonely, overwhelmed, and afraid to hurt me. But by then, I understood something I wish I had learned earlier. People who are truly afraid to hurt you do not build a second life behind your back. They do not let your sister prepare your family against you. They do not whisper in your living room after midnight and call it confusion when the lights come on. Anna tried harder. She sent long messages, then voice notes, then letters through my mother because I had blocked her everywhere else. She said Mark told her the marriage was already dying. She said she believed him. She said she hated herself for letting it happen. Maybe some of that was true, but the truth did not give her back to me. That was the hardest part to explain to people. I did not stop loving my sister in one clean moment. I lost her slowly in pieces. I lost her when she smiled across my dinner table. I lost her when she wore my wedding earrings. I lost her when she texted my mother before telling me the truth. And by the time she finally said she was sorry, there was not enough of the old us left to repair. Mark and Anna did not last. I heard that from my mother months later, though I never asked for details. Apparently, once the secrecy was gone and the damage had names attached to it, whatever they thought they had started to collapse under its own weight. That did not make me happy. It only made sense. A relationship built on betrayal has nowhere peaceful to live once the betrayal becomes public. Almost a year later, I saw Anna outside a grocery store. She looked thinner, quieter, less bright in the way she used to be when she entered a room expecting attention to bend toward her. For a second, we just stood there with shopping carts between us, two sisters who knew too much and had no idea what to do with the silence. "I'm sorry," she said. I believed her. That surprised me. But believing someone is sorry is not the same as inviting them back into your life. "I know," I said. Her eyes filled. "Do you hate me?" I thought about the question carefully, because she deserved the truth, even if she had not given it to me when it mattered. "No," I said. "I just don't feel safe with you anymore." That hurt her more than anger would have. Then I walked away. Not because I was cruel, because peace had become something I protected. Now, when people ask me what hurt most, they expect me to say losing my husband. But that is not the whole truth. Losing Mark was devastating, but losing Anna changed the way I understood my own history. It made me question every time I defended her, every warning I ignored, every moment I confused loyalty with blindness. Still, I survived it. I built a smaller life, but a cleaner one. A quiet apartment. A new routine. A phone that no longer lit up with panic. A family that finally understood I was not responsible for softening everyone else's damage. And some nights, when the house is dark and the world is quiet, I still think about that sentence Mark whispered from the living room. "She still doesn't see it." He was right then. But not for long. Because once I finally saw it, I stopped protecting the people who had used my trust against me. And that was the moment my life became mine again.